Please remain standing as on behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who gave their life for this country and its people. We also acknowledge and respect the traditional custodians on whose ancestral lands we meet. We recognise their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. Thank you. I welcome members of the gallery to this meeting, and I ask you please to observe in respectful silence as the Chamber deliberates on matters that relate to the administration of this city. I can't help noticing there's quite a number of you, and I'd be interested to know which particular issues you're here for, because I may be able to adjust the agenda to suit you. Who's here on dog and cat? Who's here on anything else? And that would be Penfold Park? Okay, well, I'll bring both of them forward. Thank you. I take the opportunity to remind elected members and members of the public in the gallery that all council meetings are recorded and they're live streamed now through the City of Burnside website. And those listening at home are encouraged to download a copy of the agenda which guides tonight's meeting, other than the adjustments I'm about to make. And should there be a fire or any other emergency, the alarm will sound, and please follow the directions of council staff. We have an apology from Councillor Lord, and we have Councillor Bills on leave of absence. Our last meeting was held on the 14th of August, and the minutes of that meeting have been distributed. Can I please have a recommendation they be taken as read and confirmed? Move Councillor Pickett, seconded Councillor Osterstock. All those in favour? Carried. My report was distributed with the meeting papers. Any questions on that report? Then can I have a recommendation that be received, please? Move Councillor Osterstock, seconded Councillor Wilkins. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. I will move around the chamber for your own reports, starting with Councillor Osterstock. No. Councillor Monto.
Just briefly, many people in this room might not be aware that the responsibility for public health is now in the hands of local government, and we have been operating until this year with a state public health plan that finishes at the end of this year. I've been working on a committee that has been helping to prepare with the LGA and South Australian Health the development of a new draft plan. That plan was set out for public consultation just yesterday. It is now on our council website. So I do encourage you to look at that, and you have the opportunity to participate in feedback in relation to the new public health plan that will operate from 2019 through to, I think it's 2024. So I encourage you to be involved in that.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I attended a workshop on Era Water on 14th of August, a citizenship ceremony in the Burnside Ballroom for, I think, 84 new citizens on the 26th of August, the 22nd, I beg your pardon. A community engagement session from the Minister of Environment and Water about changes to the NRM boards, and I can't remember the date of that, it's not in there. It was, I think, it was the 23rd of August, and also a meeting run by the LGA about the new planning legislation on the 23rd of August also.
Thank you, and I remind elected members that unless you turn your microphone on, you cannot be heard on the live streaming, and maybe cannot be heard in this chamber. So please use them. Councillor Wilkins.
Right, I'm doing so, Your Worship. I attended the last football match for the junior boys under 10 football match for Glenunga Rams, and they played at Victoria Park last Sunday, or the 19th of August. Attended the citizenship ceremony at Burnside on the 22nd. There was the forum that Councillor Lemon and I attended, Managing Our Landscapes, Conversations for Change, the National Resource Management Boards in South Australia, and that was held at Glenunga Hub on the 23rd. And on the 28th, which is tonight, we attended a caretaker candidate briefing for local government elections.
Thank you. Councillor Pickett.
Yeah, I attended an East West Special Board meeting, albeit by telephone while I was in Melbourne on the 17th of August. I participated in the interviews for the independent members of the Audit Committee on the 20th, 21st and 24th of August with the Mayor, Councillor Davey and Martin Cooper. And on Saturday morning, I attended Penfold Park, McGill, to speak to park users in respect to the proposed demolition of the toilets there.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I attended the Era Water briefing by the Chair on the 14th of August. I participated in recruitment interviews, as Councillor Piggott's mentioned, as part of the Audit Committee independent member recruitment panel between the 20th and the 24th of August, and attended the citizenship ceremony for, I'm not sure if it's 81 or 85 new Australian citizens in the Burnside Ballroom on the 22nd of August.
Councillor Cordish. Councillor Ford.
Only the caretaker workshop, Your Worship.
Thank you. So we move on to deputations, and we have a plethora of deputations. We have 2 on the Penfold Park toilet facilities, 2 on bylaws, and 1 on Koala management. It is, I am required by our convention to call them forward in the order in which they have applied, so they won't be grouped together. So I first of all ask Dr. Kevin Murphy to come and speak on the Penfold Park toilet facilities. Please take a seat here, that's right. Yes, either will do. It's been explained to you that you will have 5 minutes, and you will have a warning bell after 4. You're not obliged to use your 5 minutes. In fact, we encourage you not to. But then please remain. There may be questions for you. So over to you.
Okay. So my name is Kevin Murphy. I live on Ilfracombe Drive in Wattle Park. I've never been the head of a petition before, but I feel particularly strongly about this, so this is why I've done it. So I'm the father of 3 small girls, and we like to go to the park. Our favourite park in the area is Penfold Park. It's just right for us. Lots of people go there. It's got excellent play equipment for the girls, barbecues, tennis court facilities, and most importantly for our family, toilets. And we believe, as I think that everybody behind me on my petition believes, that a public place where people intend to spend protracted periods of time, one needs to have a basic human facility to relieve oneself when one feels the need to. So I was a little bit perturbed, not last weekend, but the week before, on a Sunday, when I took my little daughter to the toilet, to be met by a notice outside the toilet to say that it was being considered to demolish those toilets and then to have a period of observation to ascertain whether replacement toilets were required or not. I found that quite inflammatory. What's going to happen in the interim? People are still going to need to use the toilet, and I find it unacceptable. So my petition is that I understand that there's some description of antisocial and or illegal behaviour that occurs in that area that is unacceptable to the people who are living in the close vicinity. I don't know about the details of that, but I don't think that demolishing the toilets and not replacing them is a solution. I think that if they must be demolished for one reason or another, that they should be replaced with something contemporary that is more secure or fills the needs of whatever the requirement is. But I don't think it's acceptable just to demolish them without a clear plan to immediately replace them. From a personal perspective, my second daughter is severely autistic. She is essentially non-verbal. I cannot communicate to her when she needs to go to the toilet that we must get in the car and drive 10 minutes home and then she can hold it. That just isn't practical. So we already have a limited access to public places. And if those toilets go, that's another place that's shut down for us. And I find that unacceptable. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I thank you for your excellent description of the quality of the park, which I agree with. Does anyone have any questions?
Dr. Murphy, thank you for coming in and being on the head of a petition for the first time. Just to clarify, it's not really the issue of demolishing the toilets, but your your point is that park needs a toilet on an ongoing basis. Is
Yeah,
that fair to say?
yeah, that's correct. It's a little ambiguous, the notice that was there. What I found particularly inflammatory, as I said, was that it was proposed that there would be a period of observation to ascertain whether a replacement was actually going to be put in situ. And I just don't understand that. There has to be a toilet there if it's to continue to function as a park, not just for my family, but for everybody. You can't go there and flip burgers on a barbecue, you know, in 10 minutes. You're going to linger there for a couple of hours. There's people there that are playing games of tennis and squash, people playing netball. What are they going to do? Old people out walking, you know, they probably plan toilet stops.
Thank you. You've actually given your speech again. You've answered the question. Are there any other questions?
Yes, there is. I've got one.
Councillor Lemon.
Councillor Floyd first.
I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming. It's very good for this chamber
Thank you.
to get the point of view of a user, and I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you care to comment on the current status of the present toilets, and do you see anything that's required there in the foreseeable future while some alternative arrangement might be created?
From a personal perspective, I have no issue with the toilets as they currently are. I've never seen any untoward, illegal or antisocial behaviour there. I've been there many times in broad daylight, and all I do is take my kids to the toilet. I have no issue with them in their current state, but I understand that there is some sort of issue that other people have, and I think that, you know, something in terms of mutual agreement should be met.
Davey?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for coming along tonight. As my co-councillor has said, it's very useful for us to get this feedback from a resident and user. Is there anything that we could do in terms of if the toilets are rebuilt? Do they have good disabled access, and are they in any way, it's virtually the similar sort of issue, can we improve them at all?
No, well, from my perspective, our family just needs a toilet there. That's all.
Thank you for your deputation.
Thank you.
I call for Gary Soberg on the dog and cat bylaws. And,
Thank you, Your Worship.
you have heard the rules of engagement, and you please, your microphone is on, so you go for it.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I'm here regarding the dog and cat management plan. In my opinion, Burnside Council is to be congratulated on its approach to dog and cat management. Council is also responsive to concerns expressed by residents and interest groups. It must be difficult dealing with so many different and sometimes conflicting concerns. A majority of the responses related to the requirement for dogs to be kept on the leash when on Burnside public parks, including Kensington Park, when sport is being played. Their comments are strongly against this restrictive measure, some pointing out the need for clarification regarding this proposal. I would suggest that current bylaws concerning dogs in public spaces are adequate, and changing the requirement for dogs to be on leash in any parks currently off leash is excessive and unnecessary. Surely requiring dogs to be on leash within 20 metres of any oval or courts where sporting activity is taking place, such as is in the case of 20 metres away from playgrounds, would be adequate. Personal experience and study has shown me that restrained dogs tend to be more aggressive to other dogs. They fear that they cannot escape if attacked by the other dog. Socialising is important for dogs as well as humans. Dogs are social animals. One reason dogs bark excessively is by being locked behind a fence with inadequate opportunity to go outside their home to run and socialise with other dogs. Dogs run further off-leash than on-leash, leading to better quality and quantity of exercise, especially for people who cannot walk far enough to adequately exercise their dog. Dogs must be kept on leash while being walked on public roads and footpaths. If they are also required to be on kept on leash while within parks, there would be much less opportunity to safely exercise dogs. I have regularly walked our dogs in the Hazelwood Park, but no longer do so because of the problems of discarded food, packets and other such items in the park on and after weekends. There is a similar problem with other Burnside city parks, including dogs finding discarded bandages and similar. I now walk my dogs along Second Creek from Phillip Avenue, where I live, to the Boral Quarry at Stonyfell and back, traversing various parks, including Michael Perry Park, where my dogs run off-leash. And regarding cats, cat cage traps being made available for residents to borrow to catch wandering domestic and feral cats is welcomed. Registration and microchipping of cats would enable determination of ownership or otherwise of cats to determine cost recovery and warning errant owners, or to euthanize feral cats. In short, please maintain the status quo. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Gary, for coming along tonight and articulating your experiences. So just to clarify, are you saying that you think dog walkers and regulars to parks would be happy if there was a 10-metre on-leash requirement when sports activities are taking place, such as, I guess, on Kensington Gardens Reserve?
Sure.
And that a 10-metre on-leash requirement be a requirement near playgrounds, as in the big playgrounds that are in our parks. Is that
I believe that's already a requirement already in place. It's 20 metres away from playgrounds. I think that could be extended to sports ovals, sports areas where some sport is taking place, rather than having a sport in progress and banning from the whole park or the whole area, as it seemed legislation seemed to be indicating.
Thank you. Turn your microphone off, please. Thank you. Any further comments? Then thank you for your deputation.
Thank you.
Sue McGowan on the same subject.
Thank you, everyone. I hope I'm not repeating what Gary, I think...
You're going to struggle to say something different, I think.
I might say something different, you never know. My name's Sue McGowan. I've lived in Burnside for 25 years, so obviously I was very young when I arrived. I'd like to take this opportunity to endorse the revised dog management plan and the bylaw, which is in the agenda papers. Before doing so, I'd really like to thank some of the councillors. Jane and Henry both came to the park and spoke to constituents about their concerns. I know Peter's been involved as well. And also thank the administration. Lots of people rang up the administration asking questions. What does it mean by sporting activity? What's a wetland? All of that. And they got very good service. And also, I obviously want to thank the administration because they've taken into account all of the issues that were raised, and that's reflected in the changes they're proposing. I'm not going to go through all the arguments. They're articulated in the papers. I do want to make a couple of points. Allowing dogs off leash obviously have benefit for dogs. Dogs love it. But as well as exercising, it socialises dogs. I've only had a dog for about a year. I had one about 40 years ago, and they've taught me a lot of things as well. So it does reduce, I think Gary mentioned, some of the other issues. But what I've found is a benefit, which I didn't realise, of dogs is how people interact. When they go to the park, the dogs are off leash. There's a real community that develops that I wasn't aware of before then. People not only exercise, they share their knowledge, they encourage good dog ownership. Don't let your dog do that. Don't do this, do this. And it also breaks the isolation of many of people in the community. And you do form real friendships and connections in the neighbourhood. So I think it's really important for the Burnside community. This type of interaction wouldn't happen if people were walking around the streets with their dogs on leash or even through the parks. We do need dog owners to be responsible. However, I think the initial plan, which was, if someone's playing sport in this corner what, a 15 hectare reserve, is it? 16? You know, leash on leash everywhere was unduly restrictive. As I said, I've only walked my dog for the last year. We only had a dog then, but I used to use the park with my kids for the last 25 years. I've never had any issues. Everyone seems to be respectful. I don't think, as Gary said, that we need to change the status quo. So I'd ask the council to support the recommendations that have been made. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Councillor Ford.
Aye.
Yes, thanks for coming in. There is a proposal as part of the change that there should be a further report to council after November in respect to more detail about options for dogs on leash areas. Do you see a need for that? Do you have any comment to make about that?
Well, I think one option is to leave it as it is, isn't it?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sue Shearer on the Penfold Park toilet facilities.
Good evening. I'm probably going to repeat some of the things that Dr. Murphy has already said. I will try to delete those, so I'm not going to bore you witless. Penfold Park's wonderful. It's well made. We enjoy it enormously, and the locals as well as the people further afield. We're very concerned about the demolition of the toilet block. Each weekend there are a large group of people who come to enjoy the park for picnics, barbecues and especially children's parties. Not all of these people are local, as we can see by the number of parked cars. First of all, I should have said we live in Ramallo Avenue, adjoining the park. So where are people going to be able to relieve themselves if there are no toilets? Are they going behind the bushes, in the creek, under the trees? Each Saturday during winter there are scheduled Netball Association matches on the newly upgraded courts, and they're a great venue. But what a waste if future matches can't take place due to lack of toilets. The bus terminus is near the toilets, which is essential for the bus drivers and the passengers who are caught short, and especially the oldies. People play tennis and they're for hours. They often come by car or walk for several blocks to get there, too far to go home to use their toilets. Multiple houses with small backyards are being built on the original house blocks, so as the population increases, the need for toilets is going to be even greater, not less. Have you considered the consequences of no toilets and how the council workers are going to deal with the used toilet paper blowing around the park, and worse? And will they be able to keep the park hygienic and disease-free? We understand that there has been some antisocial behaviour around the toilets, and if the only way to solve this problem is with automated toilets, as Campbelltown Council has done in Gum Park, then new toilets need to be installed at the time of the demolition of the old ones. We understand this is a great expense, but please do not leave beautiful Penfold Park without toilets. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Piggott.
Actually, I don't have a question. You've covered it pretty comprehensively. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for coming in.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Finally, Angela Ridge on Koala management.
Thank you. My name is Angela Ridge. I live in Kensington Park. My husband and I have lived in our house for 11 years. Our home has a significant and protected Eucalyptus camaldulensis in the rear yard. There are others in the street and surrounding yards, including over our back fence. These trees provide habitat for koalas, native parrots and cockatoos, and possums, in addition to other small reptiles and insects. They are a food source for bees when flowering. They provide shade and visual amenity. I know of various studies which attribute a monetary value to trees, but in my eyes, the value of a 200-year-old tree which predates the settlement of man is incalculable. They are irreplaceable, yet they are being replaced every year with buildings and pools and paving. Our urban forest is at risk, not just from development but from drought and disease, and from individuals who buy houses with these trees. and then decide that they cannot be bothered raking leaves on the weekend. In April or May this year, the leaves on the significant and protected eucalyptus in the yard over our back fence turned brown. Within a fortnight, the entire canopy of leaves was dead. Before this happened, the tree appeared in perfect health, even shooting vigorously where limbs had been cut back. Shortly thereafter, a she-oak and a smaller eucalyptus in the same yard also turned brown. It seems too much of a coincidence to believe that all these trees are dying at the same time from natural causes. I believe the trees were poisoned. My communications with Council and other various public representatives regarding the decline of the protected tree all returned the same message. Yes, the law says this is not allowed, but obtaining evidence to act in support of the law is very difficult. Fines of up to $120,000 are applicable if breaches are proven, which would be a worthy deterrent if it were ever enforced. It seems fairly obvious to me that there is a problem with the law. I have been provided with a copy of advice the Council received from Gavin Layden, Principal Lawyer at Norman Waterhouse, and I read from this now. In the absence of direct evidence, e.g. a confession or a witness observation, a prosecution will necessarily rely on indirect or circumstantial evidence to establish beyond reasonable doubt the commission of an offence and that the defendant caused, suffered or permitted the unauthorised tree damaging activity. In the circumstances that you describe, obtaining such evidence will likely be difficult. As to ways to address this by way of strengthening the legislation, I, and this is Gavin Layden, not me, make two suggestions that could form the basis of a ministerial request. First, for such offences, the criminal standard of proof could be downgraded from beyond reasonable doubt to the balance of probabilities. Second, or as an alternative, the burden of proof for such offences could be reversed, i.e. once charged, there is a presumption of guilt and the onus is on the defendant to establish his or her innocence to the lesser standard on the balance of probabilities. I've read numerous policies citing Council's commitment to protecting, maintaining and enhancing the urban forest, but none of these policies will act as a deterrent to individuals who decide they do not want to live under a significant tree. Regardless of the format of the request, only changes to state legislation will give councils the power to protect trees. Several weeks ago, I obtained a copy of the House of Assembly information sheet on petitions with the intention of starting a petition for changes to our toothless tiger tree laws. A petition from and with the backing of Burnside City Council would be much more likely to have a significant impact. I call upon Council to make such a petition. For most of the past decade, we have been privileged to watch each year the appearance and growing independence of a baby koala in the pair of eucalyptus trees. My daughters have patted koalas as they sat on the fence. Our neighbours and their children visit when the koala is doing something interesting. My husband has held a water dish for a koala in the middle of a heat wave. Since the leaves belonging to the tree over the back fence are no longer a viable food source, the koalas which have for the past decade moved back and forth between the two trees now reside permanently in our tree. Last week, my husband picked up a dead baby koala from the ground in our yard. This was the first time this has happened in a decade. It was quite upsetting for both of us, and I'm glad my daughters were at school. It appeared outwardly healthy. Perhaps it fell from an unfamiliar perch in high winds. Perhaps it ate poison leaves. Perhaps it was the victim of a turf war between the two koalas which are now sharing a tree. Regardless of the reason, this recent experience with the death of a significant tree followed by the death of the baby koala, points to a rather obvious relationship between the health and number of our native trees and the health of our native fauna. Councillor Davey has recommended that Council investigate ways of supporting koalas by the planting of appropriate trees and vegetation to provide corridors to support and protect the feeding habitat. This is a worthy ambition and one I fully support. However, trees planted this year will not be substantial enough to support and protect a koala for decades. This is why we must work harder to protect our already established trees that the koalas call home. Their habitat is our heritage and our health and the health of our environment and a significant part of the leafy appeal of our suburbs. How many more reasons do we need to do everything we can to protect it?
Well timed. Thank you. You have touched on an issue that we all feel. I think the tree you are describing is in private land.
Yes, it is.
Which makes it even more difficult for us. But what I can say is that Councillor Davey very shortly will be debating a motion on notice. In fact, it's the next thing we do on that particular issue. So wait around for it.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Sorry, and Councillor Davey, you have one.
Just a quick question. Thank you very much for coming along and outlining your concerns. Your petition that you talked about or the petition,
yes,
or a petition to the House of Assembly, how could we help you with this, or how do we formulate one of these? To get, I
yeah.
guess, to get the laws changed.
The House of Assembly petition has to be structured and formatted in a certain way. So I looked at online petitions through change.org and things like that, but the House of Assembly one, I believe, has to be paper and it has to be signed, authored and signed, and addresses and all that sort of stuff. So I guess the circulation and the publicity around something like that, and actually getting the number of names on the sheet to do something worthwhile with it at the end, is difficult for an individual. So council has more forums and more clout, I guess, than just one person. That would be primarily the way that I would see that council would be able to assist with such a petition.
Thank you.
Thanks.
When you say council, the administration can't take that initiative. Individual councils can, and I urge you to. We'll wait for your motion. Thank you. Oh, hang on. Who else is there? Councillor Lemon.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry.
Thank you very much for coming in. I don't actually have a question, but I have a suggestion for you and for everyone else in the gallery tonight. Those of you that have got access to an internet connection, if you go to SA Planning Portal, there is a document that's currently out for consultation about planning and the environment, and what you're talking about in terms of maintaining the tree canopy in beautiful leafy areas like ours. You can make comment on that Have Your Say site, where you can say everything that you've told us today to the people that will actually be creating the new regulations for planning, which will make a difference to whether the trees stay or don't. So I urge everyone to go to that place.
Thank you for your deputation. That concludes the deputations, and we have one petition. It is on a petition for the Royal Avenue Burnside footpath. It's on page 13 of your agenda. There is an officer's recommendation on this matter, and I seek a mover to that effect. Move Councillor Cornish wish to speak to it? No. Is a seconder? Councillor Lemon, any debate? I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. We move on to questions on those. And we have three. The first from Councillor Davey regarding use of drones, and the answers are provided to you. The second, again from Councillor Davey, is on the claddings of private and public buildings, and are there any identified as containing aluminium composite? And there is an answer to you there. And finally, Councillor Ford has asked his annual question, how many on roads, collisions and statistics, and the answer is there as well. So we move on to motions on notice. We have one, Councillor Davey, on page 67 of your agenda. And Councillor Davey, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I've moved this motion on notice coincidentally with one of the issues that's been raised tonight, and it's about our koala habitat and the koalas that are now in our community. As we all know, they're much loved and of great importance to the people of Burnside, as well as more widely in South Australia. They are classed as a vulnerable species under the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, which I think is a federal act. A bit of a history of this is that the original population of native koalas in South Australia was exterminated by 1920 due to their being killed for their pelts for the fur trade. After reintroduction, which was I think in about the 1960s, they are now found throughout the Mount Lofty Ranges, plus the eastern and central suburbs of the city of Adelaide. The recent koala counts in 2012 and 2016, which were undertaken by a partnership of UniVSA and the National Natural Resources Management Board, identified the population at around 118,000 across the hills, Adelaide Hills, and I think further down to the Fleurieu Peninsula. So as the koalas look for new feeding trees, mates and territory, They're quite mobile and happily move down from the hills to the suburbs, which is what we've found. Many backyards and parks across Burnside have their resident koalas, loved and protected by the locals who do not like to publicise their presence to prevent interference. However, the damage to and loss of many of our remnant trees in the last big drought, coupled with the huge losses of these trees as our large residential blocks are subdivided and developed, mean that across Burnside we've lost over 10% of our tree canopy and therefore koala habitat. We have budgeted monies for tree planting, but no targeted systematic plan for planting of trees which support our fauna, particularly our koala population, is in place. We have dedicated koala carers, volunteers across Burnside in our community who protect and water our population, particularly in hot weather when koalas are particularly vulnerable. This motion asks that the administration turns their minds to what methods can be used to plant appropriate tree corridors and in which locations, which will support our koalas without identifying their locations, so they have every opportunity to live a peaceful life in our city, and that the administration bring a report to council on how this can be achieved. If I may, I overlooked reading the motion, so for everybody, I've asked that a report be brought to council on the 11th of September, which is the next meeting in 2 weeks, which considers and recommends how council can support safe koala movement from the Hills Face Zone through to its major reserves, in particular Hazelwood Park, Kensington Gardens Reserve and Kensington Park Reserve, by the planting of appropriate trees and vegetation to provide corridors to support and protect their feeding habit. Thanks. I ask that you support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. I have a question of the administration. I'm surprised that you're calling for a report in 14 days, or what must be roughly 14 days. What's the councillor's... is that something that the administration can handle?
Through the chair, as you've heard from the speakers, it's quite a significant issue and study that would be required into this. And to do this report justice, there's no way we'd be able to have done it by the agenda next Thursday.
So what would be a reasonable time frame in your view?
The Environment and Biodiversity Strategy, which considers the protection and enhancement of fauna habitat, is due for review following the elections. We would suggest that we would have a look at a citywide approach and cover the requested motion as part of that development of the review of that strategy, which elected members and the community will be involved in.
So if you had your way, you would seek this motion to be changed to, rather than read a report to be brought to council on 11th of September, that this matter be considered as part of your
review of the Environment and Biodiversity Strategy.
And be reported to council as part in that framework by?
The process will start following the elections, so that would be December, January. The report back at the end would be the end of the financial year. Yeah. To go through the process of a review and to ensure that it's an all-encompassing review and a complete revision, we would be able to turn that around by the end of the current financial year.
Okay. Councillor Davey, are you happy to consider that as an alternative motion?
Could I just ask a question? I was concerned about we're moving into the caretaker period, and I wasn't sure how much time we had for a motion to be adopted and then the time for the administration to provide even a preliminary report. Would a month's time be preferable to at least give a preliminary report on how we can use our existing funds that we've got in our budget, the funds we've already allocated, to look at how we can use them to start planting trees for koala habitat?
Well, my view on that would be, Councillor Davey, that there is no such thing as a half-measured preliminary report. It's got to be in a total context, and I imagine that's what the advice for administration would be, but I will ask them anyway.
Through the Chair, the budgets set for this year are already allocated and are already programmed with respect to tree planting across the city. We're actually moving into quite a busy period for our biodiversity conservation and arborist teams. To turn around a report like this during that busy period would truthfully be difficult for existing resources. What we could do is bring back a report which sets out the process and the intention of the revision of the existing strategy that provides timelines and our high-level intentions at that point.
Could we do that?
The answer is yes. So let us change your motion to read that a report brought back to council by the second meeting in September, which gives a high-level overview of how council can support Safe Koala movement through its biodiversity program. Give me the words.
Through the revision of the environment and biodiversity strategy. Would you be comfortable with that?
And I want tree corridors in there somewhere. Support Safe Koala movement and tree corridors.
That's what the strategy identifies.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
I'm happy with that, yes. Thank you.
So, is that
realising it's high level, yes.
Is that wording now acceptable to you? Okay. There's your motion. Now you can. You've moved, spoken to it. I seek a seconder. Councillor Wilkins.
Thank you, Worship. I'm very happy to support Councillor Davies' motion that we bring forward the process by which the environment and biodiversity strategy will proceed. So an overview of the process with timelines, because it's not just only the species of tree that supports koalas, but it's also the species of tree that supports the glossy black cockatoos that were first started back in the era of the Howard government when funds were given to the lower foothills for plantings there. So have we continued on with those? There are other species that need to be there and planted. In the next planting season, I agree with the administration, it's too late now to start planting into the beginning of summer. It's better to do it in a structured and informed way, and let's go via a process. I think this is a really good outcome. I would suggest to the petitioner, the resident, that she seeks some advice from Vicky Chapman's office about the outline of the wording for a petition and circulate that in the community in the coming months leading up to this report and into the new year, the process for the environment and biodiversity strategy that we'll put together, or the administration will put together. Thank you for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
I have a couple of questions of administration, if I may. As part of this, would you have time to also make comment on the Planning Act in terms of biodiversity? The comments are due by the 3rd of December this year, and if we are going to go down this path, I actually think it's a path that needs to have two aspects to it. One of them is that you make comment on what the plans are for Burnside, so that we need to look at tree canopy as part of this process in terms of, you know, we're from the hills to the plains, so that needs to be part of it in terms of the comments we make to the SA planning. And the other part of it, of course, is our planners probably need to put their minds to an overlay for the regulations for this area.
This is still a question, is it, Councillor?
Yes, and will there be integration between what you're doing in your biodiversity strategy and our planning department that will then complement what you're doing in the sorts of comments we're making to the planning department, the state planning department? I guess what I'm saying is, can you integrate these things to make them really powerful?
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. More to come.
Excellent answer. Thank you. Councillor Monto.
As you're aware, there are only certain types of eucalypt trees that the koalas like to eat. We're fortunate to have planted some on our property, and hence we have koalas. My concern is every weekend, and particularly on Saturday, there would have been at least 3 chainsaws in my street, heavily at work chopping down trees. Now, they weren't significant, but they were habitats for birds and koalas, possums, etc., that inhabit our area. And you've already heard our tree canopy, since the count was done, and that was about 5 or 6 years ago, has dropped by more than 10%. And I reckon if we did a count today, it would be probably another 10%. So I think wherever we can, we need to be saying to our neighbours as well as our government, don't chop down trees. Look at the safe removal of branches if you've got concern. Reduce maybe some of the overhead canopy, but don't cut down a tree. Or don't buy a house that has a big tree in it and then immediately cut the tree down because it doesn't suit your area or your way of life, or you're concerned about a branch falling down. The concern is that we also have to look at the competition that koalas are facing, the traffic issues, because I see them dead on the freeway frequently, the types of trees that are being planted. Now, not every suburban garden is suitable for planting a eucalypt, or particularly a large eucalypt, but there are a lot of smaller eucalypts that can be planted and that can be used, that koalas will eat. And there, of course, as Councillor Davies mentioned, the issue of storm damage, and we saw that massive storm that did a great deal of damage, particularly in Hazelwood Park, about 4 or 5 years ago. And that resulted in a lot of debris and a lot of lost habitat. So it's also a public issue, not just a government issue. It's about not buying a property and then chopping down every single tree or removing every single plant and then building a concrete casa that occupies the entire property and there's no garden left at all. And that's an individual choice that people make, and they're making increasingly so in Burnside. That's what I don't like.
Thank you. There's no further debate. So, Councillor Davey, you may sum up if you wish.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, everyone, for your input, and to the administration. I'm happy that it's a good outcome, that a consideration be given to a high-level report which gives some structure to outline how we can actively support, because that's what we need to be doing, actively support koala habitat in the forthcoming review of Council's Environment and Biodiversity Strategy. So hopefully you can all support this.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That appears to be carried unanimously. Thank you. Are there any questions without notice?
Yes.
Okay.
Burnside administration has been informed by Era Water Board that it will lose $830,000 this financial year. Other 2 councils have been informed of this. I have the copy of the document here. Why haven't we? Subsequent question, how will our council pay for its 1/3 share this year and in forthcoming years? That's my first question. I have a second question. I've got it here. Dated the 10th of August, 2018. Addressed to Paul Deb, Era Water response to City of Burnside information requests.
Through the Mayor, that correspondence was going to be the subject of a fairly detailed council report to be presented, because it contains information that the administration doesn't necessarily agree with, and we want to have dialogue with the chairman of Era Water prior to presenting that to council.
But both the other councils have already received it.
Yes, they may well have had, but that's in response to a query and a council resolution and a recommendation from the audit committee about a forensic review of the accounts. So we're not satisfied with that response at this point in time, and we're still engaging in dialogue with Era Water, and we'll present a report when it's in a fit state to be presented to council.
Okay. My second question then, has the administration employed an independent forensic analyst yet to report on Era Water as required by motion C11-737 of the 26th of June this year?
Through the Mayor, no, we have not, because, and that was also going to be contained in the report that we're presenting to council, simply because the cost of doing so is incredibly significant and would not provide the council with the information that it's seeking to get from Era Water. It will simply provide information that the council already knows. So what we have done is we've engaged, and that's part of the response that's come from Era Water. We've engaged with Era Water to ask them whether they can actually provide the information that the council needs to satisfy itself regarding the financial position.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Higgett, authorise a motion without notice from you, which relates to the Penfold Park toilets, and you now can have the floor.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for accepting my motion without notice. And my motion is that demolition of the Penfold Park toilets will not occur unless approved by council, and secondly, a report be provided to council outlining the options for addressing the existing issues but maintaining a toilet facility at Penfold Park. I've had the advantage tonight of 2 deputations in respect to this issue that both spoke eloquently of their personal views on why Penfold Park requires a toilet, and that is the key, I think. And the key to this motion is not necessarily whether the current toilets are demolished or not. As I see it, the motion keeps both keeping them and replacing them as options going forward. But what it doesn't do is have as an option that Penfold Park goes forward without a toilet. And that's really what came through from the 2 deputations. When you look at Penfold Park, it's quite a large park, actually. We've invested in a number of facilities. We've got barbecues there, we've got tennis courts, 2 playgrounds for different aged kids, a lot of open space, treed spaces, etc. And a park without a toilet really does diminish the users that can actually properly use that park. And it's not appropriate, I don't think, and it's backed up by 2 members of the community and a petition that is also on its way, that really the community believes that the park does require a toilet. Administration is well across the issues as to why we've got here, and I'm not here to debate those, but what I do ask is support for this motion that allows us to just hold the horses a little bit, and let's look at this issue more roundly, but also find a solution where we maintain toilets at that park. So I'd appreciate your support on the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Pickett. Councillor Rossstock, you wish to second this motion?
Yes, I'll second the motion. I've read the report is very detailed. It outlines the issues that are confronting the local community in that toilets catchment. The undesirable activities occur primarily during Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I do encourage any member of the public who identifies or suspects any unsavoury activity occurring during those periods to contact the police on 131 444 immediately, and I'm sure they'll respond. The report details how within the last 12 months police have responded to 18 reports of illegal activity of an undesirable nature occurring in or around that toilet facility. That equates to nearly 1 a week. They're the ones that have been reported. I think it would be safe to say that you could double that with respect to ones that go unreported. Having said that, I do support the public conveniences being maintained at that site, but I think that, having read the report, there are options through crime prevention, through environmental design, to drastically minimise the attractiveness of that facility by replacing it, in my view, with an automated facility that I think will go a long way to deter unsavoury activity occurring at that site, and indeed provide the local residents and community with a modern, safe public convenience.
Thank you, Councillor Day.
I too read the report, and I think, and I've heard, we've heard what the residents have said. It's a beautiful park. There is a huge amount of activity taking place there, and I think we do need to maintain the toilet facility. But I'm happy to be advised by the staff as to what the best options are in terms of how that can be done.
Thank you, Councillor Monso.
I just wanted to make a comment about the replacement of public toilets. Not long ago, the Adelaide City Council replaced toilets along South Terrace in both of the major playground areas. And on one particular afternoon, I had some visitors from interstate and they needed to use a toilet, and I pulled up at the toilet, one of these new automated, super, classy toilet blocks, because the old rotten, appearing to be rotten, old red brick toilet block at the back was no longer in use. Went to use that, line up to use that toilet. First of all, there was the one toilet with those automatic press button things, playing music and all the, lovely gadgets that go with it. But that toilet was completely blocked. It was unusable, and there would have been 100 people in that playground. So I really caution the use of those particular kinds of toilets, because they only allow one person at a time. They occupy a huge amount of space, and they're awfully, awfully expensive. There are lots better ways that we can cater, and I'm sure the gentleman who was here before, his daughter, who would not be wanting to wait in a queue for one toilet to be vacated when they're allowed to be in there up to 10 minutes, according to the timer on those stupid machines. So I really do think that not demolishing the old toilet, but actually renovating the existing toilets and perhaps adding some sort of screening or some environmentally friendly thing that may be graffiti proof and may be easier to be looked at or observed is a much better option than one of those very, very expensive toilets that play music and are useless when it comes to a lot of people wanting to use it.
Thank you, Councillor Monso. Rather than speculate, we'll wait for the report from the administration. No further debate. I will, Councillor Pickett, may I put the motion?
Thank you for your input. And I think the discussion does show that we don't necessarily have the answer, and we do look forward to seeing what the answer is. But the answer isn't the park continuing without a toilet. And what this motion does is actually allow us a bit of time to sort out what the right answer is. So I appreciate support.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Again, unanimous. Thank you. So we move on to reports from officers, and we have 14 lined up. I intend bringing forward the issue of dog and cat management, 1412 to the beginning, but I'll go through the list first to see which matters we will be debating tonight. The amendment to the Burnside War Memorial Constitution, Councillor Cornish, you will pull that. The procurement policies review is not being pulled, so I seek a mover of that motion on page 101, please. Move Councillor Pickett, seconded Councillor Davey. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. The discretion rates review policy. You wish to pull that?
I want to pull it.
Councillor Osterstock. The risk management review policy. Then the motion is on page 167. Councillor Cornish, you moving that motion? Seconded Councillor Osterstock. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. The remake of confidential orders, we need to deal with that. So unless someone, that's got to be dealt with in two sections, two parts, so I will pull that and when we come to it. The issue of the confidential items annual review, I have a conflict, so I'll leave that till the end of the agenda. So 14.8, operation of the community land motion register, pretty simple one. Anyone move? Councillor Cornish will move that. Seconded. Councillor Osterstock. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. The issue of request to discharge a land management agreement in Travis Drive. You're moving it? Seconder. Councillor Piggott. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. And the consent to deposit a plan of division in 1718 Ifold Drive. Again, move. You wish to pull that? Okay. The Glenside precinct, that's the Glenside Hospital precinct, or the new development precinct, speed limit review. You wish to pull it? No. You wish to move it? A seconder? Councillor Wilkins. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Who wishes to pull the Dog and Cat Management Board? Councillor Davey. 1413, the 2018 Council Bylaw Review. Having to move it? You want to pull it? And finally, the Community Garden Policy Review. Seconded, Councillor Lemon. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. So, we have a few pulled, but the one we'll deal with now is 1412, Dog and Cat Management Plan 18 to 23, page 287. Councillor Davey, you have the motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move, generally in accordance with the recommendation, but with an extra caveat, that the report be received, one, that no changes be made to the current off-leash use of parks for dog exercise without community consultation.
Sorry, I haven't caught up with this. I've been distracted by noises off. You're changing the officer's recommendation.
I'm just adding it, yes, just
okay,
another sentence. So I'll repeat it again, that the report be received, that no changes be made to the current off-leash use of parks for dog exercise without community consultation, and 3, that Council adopt the revised City of Burnside Dog and Cat Management Plan 2018 to 2023 and forward the document to the Dog and Cat Management Board for endorsement. So, you're just adding number 2. Can I suggest that becomes the 3rd rather than the 2nd? Because in fact the rise for does not change it. So what you are doing is putting in stone that no change can be made without community consultation. So if you want to change... Okay, yes, I'm happy to do that. Yes, that's logical.
Okay,
Thank you,
I accept that. You may speak to that.
Thank you, Worship. This plan sets it, and a lot of work's gone into it, and I thank everybody for that, from the staff and everybody. This plan sets the direction for management of urban animals, our much-loved dogs and cats, for the next 5 years. So it's very important. It reflects the new government changes and was open for community consultation for 3 weeks in June and July, resulting in a great deal of interest as demonstrated in the 77 responses to this and all of the feedback that we've been getting from our community. We have approximately 5,000 dog owners in Burnside with an unknown population of cats, both owned and loved, plus the feral variety. The benefits of owning pets are considerable, as we've heard tonight, and Council has the responsibility to promote the benefits of dog and cat ownership, encourage responsible dog and cat ownership, reduce public and environmental nuisance, minimise the impact of animals on native animals and bird life, particularly cats, and deliver effective, efficient and innovative dog and cat management services. The management plan we have before us sets the direction for these responsibilities, but there is considerable opposition to the introduction of on-leash restrictions for dogs. We've always had the ability for dogs to exercise off-leash in our parks and reserves, but on-lead, of course, everywhere else, so in our footpaths and roads for community and animal safety. Cats are, I note, cats are currently able to roam totally unrestricted, which very many do. Many of my constituents are dog owners and enjoy the socialising, sense of community and friendship of their informal interactions while exercising their dogs, particularly in our large reserves of Hazelwood Park, Kensington Gardens Reserve and Kensington Oval. Respondents have articulated clearly that there must be a demonstrated need for review of the City of Burnside parks and reserves, with very good reasons needed to impose restrictions of off-leash exercise. On off-leash exercise practices, which are currently the status quo and which work for dog owners and their dogs with minimal risk to park users. We must, and we have committed to this, also introduce an education program for the new requirements for microchipping and desexing for both cats and dogs, the requirements for breeders, and we must educate and provide leadership to cat owners to confine their animals, to protect them and to prevent nuisance to neighbours and stop predation of our birds and wildlife. And we must also allocate sufficient resources to enforce these provisions. We also need to have an excellent complaints system in place for both dog and cat nuisance, so we know what they are and can act on the issues equitably, because we already have good dog reporting mechanisms but not so good for cats, so we really need to know how people are being affected by cats in the community. There are already many requirements for dog owners to comply with, and there must now be a greater focus on improving management of our cat populations. I believe that this management plan implements well the provisions of the new legislation, and while I would like to see a cat bylaw developed and introduced, I hope that could be done by the next council. I believe the community is very happy with the existing arrangements, as I've said, for exercising dogs off-leash in safety in our parks, and that there needs to be a need demonstrated for change to this, as well as for the fencing of our play spaces, which we currently don't do. I hope you'll support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. I seek a seconder. Councillor Wilkins.
I'm happy to support this motion. I do, as a dog owner, support the current off-leash use of parks for dog exercise, because in all occasions that I've been in parks with my dog, I see other people with control of their dogs, and I haven't seen any wayward use or activities by dogs, even around young children at sports on each weekend. If we are at sport, the dog is on leash. All of the other families who are in the park, families with teams playing junior sport, their dogs are on leash. It's only once I've seen a small dog off leash. People are responsible, and I think we need to acknowledge that, and I don't see the need to change our consistent off-leash use. I've had lots of friends who've contacted me re Kensington Gardens Reserve, and I respect the fact that, yes, it's a great park, and I'm so pleased to hear the word connection with people, and actually isolation is another word that's constantly being used these days with older persons who are, if they have a small dog, they're out, they socialise in the park. What a healthy place to walk, exercise, but a healthy place and an open air space in which they gather together, meet new friends, and they're exercising dogs and people as well. So I'm happy to support this motion.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Anyone wish to contribute to the debate? There being Councillor Ford.
Yeah, so thank you, Your Worship. I have a question of administration. On page 320 at point 27, it proposes that a further report be presented to Council post-November 2018, which will explore in more detail the options for dog on-leash areas. So my question is, why do you see the need for this at this time, rather than allow things to play out, and if the need arises, perhaps to make that consideration?
Through the chair, if for no other reason there is a legislative compulsion for us to do that. Section 26A of the Dog and Cat Management Act really stipulates that a dog and cat management plan must have areas for both on-lead and off-lead management of dogs. Now, at the moment, our management plan provides for no off-lead areas, on-lead areas, my apologies, on-lead areas. They're entirely under this management plan. All of our reserves are 100% off-lead. So the Dog and Cat Management Board, however, is happy for us to defer that conversation with the community until next year, but it's one that we really need to have in a more sort of broad and holistic sense, frame some good questions to the community about what does it see as an appropriate management of the dogs. Are there areas where dogs on leash would be appropriate, e.g. within 10 metres of a sporting event? So I think the bottom line answer to the question is we have to do it. It doesn't mean we necessarily have to end up with dog on-lead areas, but we at least need to have that discussion with the community in accordance with that with the resolution tonight.
Thank you.
Well,
do you wish to speak on the matter?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I do compliment those who have raised this issue into the public mind and spoken in favour of the current system, because I think you're being realistic and I support that entirely. It does bother me that we have this ongoing bureaucratic sort of undertone that's as a result of this point, but you know, for further review and the like, I would have seen it as reasonable to just let it play out and only pursue these matters if the need arises. Nevertheless, I'll accept the advice of administration in that respect, and I won't move to amend it as I had formerly thought I might. But I do support the resolution and the change, and that no change be made.
Councillor Ford makes a good point, and if there is a deluxe version of that review and a light version, then I think the message here is make it the light version. Councillor Davey.
I just had a question in relation to that, because I'm not quite clear about it. Have we not just had an extensive community consultation process with the input provided from our 77 respondents? Does that not constitute part of what the Dog and Cat Management Act requires?
Through the chair, I guess it was a partial consultation, but probably not holistic and robust enough for us to really have fleshed out the issue of where the balance lies. The balance lies between on-lead and off-lead, and that balance will be different from different between different councils. The Dog and Cat Management Board said to us today that we're unusual. It's not a bad thing, it's just an observation. Most other councils will have some form of dog restraint in certain circumstances, e.g. the sporting events or within 10 metres of a playground, just to keep dogs out of playgrounds and off sporting fields. But that's something that we can really do it light but targeted community engagement process next year.
Thank you. Councillor Monteau.
I think the consultation is the key, and I don't have a problem with dogs or cats. I only have problems with some of their owners. And I'm sure that present people who've gone to the trouble of writing a concern, being present at this meeting, are responsible owners. Unfortunately, some of the areas that I traverse in my what little time I have for recreation, I do see the result of, or I do see some irresponsible dog owners, and I certainly experience irresponsible cat owners in relation to the destruction of native wildlife. And in relation to dogs, it's mostly some people who are still extremely lazy or visually unable to notice their dog droppings that they leave behind, particularly in Hazelwood Park, because every time I went to the pool in the summer, and that was 4 times a week, I would have to avoid dog droppings in Hazelwood Park as I walked from my car. So not everybody is a responsible owner, and it is unhealthy for children, it is unhealthy for adults to have to avoid it or clean it up before they sit down in a park to have a picnic, or to, worse than that, have to clear an oval, and I've had to do that a number of times when I was a PE teacher, having to clear an oval of dog faeces prior to being allowed getting a game started. So it is about education, it is about responsible dog ownership. And as I said, I'm sure you're all very responsible, but there are unfortunately people out there who are not.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkins.
Yes, Your Worship, I have a question to the administration via you. In the consultation process, perhaps it's worthwhile that we have an educative part to that process. And has the City of Burnside ever sponsored a dog training program?
Through the chair, in relation to the first point, I've certainly made a note of that. Would really have to take that second question on notice. I don't. Certainly can't recall any.
However, there are dog training programs provided very close to the City of Burnside, and I don't see really why the city should do things that the community does provide. I think that would be not a good use of our scarce resources, my personal view. They may not have the facilities that we offer. Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Parkin. I'm very supportive of the motion as it stands. I think it's a very smart idea to ask for that community consultation. Clearly, we have demonstrated that we listen and we incorporate those changes into it. And I think we can learn, and we always do learn from our consultation periods. And perhaps rather than do a whole citywide, we do it park by park. And we just ask for each individual park whether or not it's on leash or off leash, and we explore what the issues might be for individual parks. There might be some small parks or that are just playground, you know, the little corner down the road, sort of playground one where big dogs should be on leads, and it might be purposeful park by park, and we actually can discuss that with the community and the specific requirements there. But I'm very supportive of the motion as it stands.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. And Councillor Davey, you may sum up if you wish.
Just briefly, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you everyone for your contributions. As we've noted, the vast percentage of dog owners are very responsible and manage and exercise their dogs in Burnside very responsibly. As we've already had extensive community consultation, which has demonstrated significant support for the status quo, I look forward to the involvement of the community at the earliest opportunity if we must further review the on-leash, off-leash designations of our parks with the next council in the new year. So I hope you can support the motion. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Now, I've looked at the agenda. There are a number of issues that are coming up that, in fact, members have conflicts on. So, no, I'm going to go on Well, I'm just going to pick out the ones that don't. No one's going to disappear. No one's going to disappear. I will first deal with 14.3, which is discretionary rates rebate, which Councillor Ostock has pulled. Then Councillor Monceau, you've pulled the matter of Ifold Drive. We'll do that. I'm just explained that the ones that require people to leave the chamber with conflicts, I am leaving to last. And then Councillor Day, and then Councillor Monceau, you again on the bylaws. Then we'll go to the ones that have a conflict issue. So for Councillor Ostock, 14.3, discretionary rates rebate, page 151.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move recommendation 1, report be received. 2, that the Council adopt the revised discretionary rates rebate policy. And 3, I move that Council writes to the Minister for Local Government seeking clarification on what facility constitutes an educational facility for the purposes of discretionary rate rebates.
So seeking clarification of what constitutes an educational facility.
Correct.
So we take out the first facility.
What constitutes? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Rights to as well.
The council,
Yeah, it's in there.
or that the CEO on behalf of council writes to the local government minister seeking clarification on what constitutes an educational facility for the purposes of discretionary rate rebates. And speaking to that motion, we have a unique situation where there are private schools within the city of Burnside who are afforded a taxpayer-funded discretionary rate rebate, because that's what it is, for such things as houses that are on the school grounds or indeed owned by private schools that house school staff, and they, at this point in time, are receiving discretionary rate rebate. Now, the legislation, and I offer the staff to correct me if I'm wrong, the legislation simply says that a discretionary rate rebate can be applied to educational facilities. Now, an educational facility to me is a sporting oval, a classroom, a science lab, a theatre. That to me is an educational facility. It's not a house or houses that are owned by an institution's, that make up an institution's portfolio, that are being used to house and provide accommodation to educational facilities staff. I think that's wrong. I don't think that the ratepayers of the City of Burnside should be providing a rebate in such circumstances. So I think the legislative term of educational facility for the purposes of rate rebates needs to be clarified. What is Parliament's view, what is the government's view on what constitutes an educational facility? And I think it's incumbent upon the council to seek such clarification. So all it is a letter. Hopefully it'll be answered, and we can reassess our position from there. I don't know what the answer's going to be. I've got my view, but the bottom line is I don't think it passes the pub test in terms of the taxpayers giving such facilities rate rebates for houses for school staff. That doesn't sit comfortably with me, and I don't think it would sit comfortably with the majority of taxpayers here in the city of Burnside.
Thank you, Councillor Osterstock. I'm pondering whether that's in fact an appropriate change, because that's actually a mandatory rebate, not discretionary.
Oh, sorry, mandatory.
But,
Change the term.
well, you can change it there, but that's actually not what the motion is about. However, it doesn't matter. I'm happy to let it ride, because if we can get that letter written, it helps. I could argue that it's not relevant to the motion, but we'll let it sit. That's been moved. A seconder, Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'm happy to.
Well, I think you turn it off.
Sorry. Yes, I'm happy to support this. I think the points that Councillor Osterstock has raised are very pertinent, and I'd like to know those answers too, so I fully support this.
Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I'm always in favour of asking a question or two, so I don't have a problem with the motion, but I do have a question about the application, in fact, because you know, is it envisaged that these houses are on separate titles? I mean, I'm not really clear on the... They are?
There are quite a few.
Right.
That are on separate titles that are being given mandatory rebates under the guise of educational facilities.
Right, okay.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Mayor Parkin. I won't be supporting the motion as it reads, primarily because I think the Act actually does a pretty good job of giving a description. Section 165, Part B, occupied by non-government school registered under the Education and Early Childhood Services Registration and Standards Act of 2011 and being used for educational purposes will be rebated 75%. Then Part 2, the rates on land being used by university or university college to provide accommodation or other forms of support for students on a not-for-profit basis will be rebated at 75%. So I think that's probably the answer that would get back, so I won't be supporting it.
With respect, Councillor Cornish, I don't agree with that, in the sense that what Councillor Osterstock is about is not for the students, it is actually for the staff. And you read about students. So look, it's a mid point. It's worth asking. No harm in it. Councillor Wilkins is next.
I actually wanted to ask a question on that very same point, because 5414, page 155, says where the land is being used for educational purposes, and that's why they get the rebate. But also, I wouldn't just assume that those houses are being used for staff. I would think that in some of those facilities, they are being used as educational venues, and they may be part of the boarding house system. So, well, I haven't got any in mind. I've lived on site in Saints.
The issue is, let's get an answer and see what it is. There's no point in us speculating. Councillor Monceau.
I just wanted to ask through the Mayor, Ms Reynolds, about this issue, because I did raise this issue about 12 months or so ago when we were looking at the last review of this discretionary rates. And it was something that you were going to pursue at that time. I just wondered what had arisen as a result of that pursuit.
Sure. Through the Chair, that is correct, Councillor Monceau. About 12 months ago, we did undertake a review of the educational facilities, especially the boarding houses. We received an application which requested rebates across a number of those houses, but we did find that not all of those houses were being used for educational purposes. Some of them were rightly being used for staffing of the head of the boys' boarding school or the head of the girls who's on call. What we did as a review was ask for the position descriptions of those specific individuals and the contracts, and verified the dates, etc., and that they were actually living in that house and were on call for the boarding facilities. There were a couple of other houses that were not being used, that were being rented out, that we have rightly rated and not given the mandatory rebate.
Would it be your view that, and I think we all know, we're talking about one institution here, I think, that I'm aware of, that issue has been considered and addressed adequately?
Through the chair, we have certainly done an extensive review and looked across all the properties that come under that particular educational institute to verify that they are being used for what is deemed as an educational purpose.
So can I just clarify, just on the back of that question, you said that you sought there's obviously houses that are accommodating members of staff, and you sought the position description of those staff. You mentioned a head of boarding that you felt was appropriate to qualify. Did you also identify other staff with position descriptions that didn't qualify and then therefore didn't get the rebate? Is that what you're saying?
Through the chair, just to clarify, there were some contracts which said that as part of the remuneration package they would be provided a housing facility, and their position description said that they would be on call for the boarding houses. On the other hand, there were some houses that were in the application that did not have a related person living there, or that didn't have, it wasn't the accommodation for the boarding, the head of the boys' boarding school. It was
head of geography or something?
Well, we did a bit of research and we did found it available for rent, so we...
Which is, it strikes me you've got three options though, haven't you? Available for rent seems clear-cut, I assume, and therefore doesn't get the rebate. Yep. Head of boarding you feel qualifies and gets it. And then you've got the person who's not on call but is a member of staff. Do we have any of those?
None of them were living in any of those houses.
Right, okay, thank you. Actually, I won't support it, but not the reason being I feel it's the wrong question. I actually think the question to the Minister of Local Government should be that they take the opportunity as a new government to review mandatory rate rebates. Because I think the issue is, and you know, it's great that we did flesh that out, it's the issue that Councillor Osterstock raised is valid. It does sound like we've done some work on it. Where you sit on the line, fair enough, but it does sound like there's been some work done on it. But I personally feel as a arm of local government, it's a reasonable question to have the whole concept of mandatory rate rebates reviewed in terms of what does qualify it, because I think there is an argument that could be made that perhaps private schools, whether the percentage is right or whether it's too much or whether they should get it at all, I think that's something that probably hasn't been looked at in recent times, and I would feel that is a more appropriate question of the new Minister for Local Government. Presumably a change to that would not be accepted as an amendment. Mr Mayor?
No, I can't accept that as an amendment, but I believe it's a very sensible approach. So what Council's options on that are to let this ride and see what the letter does, and maybe someone at a future time can move a motion to that effect. That would be my preference.
Yep, fair enough.
Councillor Cornish, you have a question, obviously.
I do have a question. Just in terms of the wording of the motion too, obviously it's just asking for a definition or clarification without any hint to the three tiers that we were just explained, and obviously that's the highlighting points that we want to get clarification on. So will the CEO actually provide that additional information into the letter to the Minister? Context, yeah, exactly. Rather than just a legal definition.
I think we need to rephrase it.
Councillor, that puts the administration in a difficult position because they are then taking it themselves to put their own clarification, which is unreasonable. Again, I go back to where I was. I think you have the option as a chamber to debate this and up or down. If the motion loses, we still have to deal with the issue, that discretionary rebates policy, and maybe it can be dealt with differently. My preference would be to separate the two entirely, deal with 1 and 2 as it was put before us, and if a councillor wishes to raise the matter of a clarification on educational facilities, let's do it as a separate motion at another time, or next meeting as a motion on notice. I think that would be simpler all round, in my view. Councillor Wilkins.
I just have a further question too. From my knowledge of private schools and spaces they inhabit, a lot of the original buildings in private schools are of historic and they are heritage significance to the community and the school and make up the whole ambience of the school. So 5413, where the rebate will conduce to the preservation of buildings or places of historic significance, is it not another important measurement for mandatory rebates to be given to historic properties in school grounds?
The answer is yes. It is certainly a good consideration.
Not when they turn over under.
Thank you. Councillor Monceau.
I only asked a question before, and now I'd like to just very briefly speak. I'm not going to support the motion as it stands with 1, 2 and 3, because I think that we have already investigated, and I think I thank the council for doing that, over a year ago on this very issue. So I won't support 1, 2 and 3, but I would have supported 1 and 2.
The debate is over. Councillor Osterstock, you may speak to your motion.
Thank you. For ease, I'll withdraw point 3 of my motion, and I'm sure Councillor Davey would agree. So the motion now is 1 and 2. I give notice that I'll liaise with the staff and put a motion on notice to encompass the comments of Councillor Piggott and Councillor Cornish, because I think it is a worthy issue that needs sound clarification. It's not as easy. It's not an easy situation, in my view, I have my views on what constitutes an educational facility. Clearly there's some skirting around the edges from various institutions, and quite frankly, they're not doing anything wrong.
Councillor Osterstock, you're not addressing the motion as it now stands.
I'm addressing rebates generally. So I ask for your support.
So what we have before us now, councillors, is the officer's recommendation, and I put that motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. A long way around to get there, but we got there. Councillor, I'm now going to 1410. Councillor Monceau, the IFOL plan, deposit plan, page 245.
so that I can put it on a 2-for-1 instead of a 1-for-1, which expands, which fulfills the dreams of the previous government in terms of urban landfill. But from my point of view, since I get a lot of complaints from people, and I'm sure everybody else around the table does, from people who are objecting to the kind of urban landfill that we're getting at the moment with these 2 or 3-for-1s and multi-stories and destruction of backyards.
Thank you, Councillor Monceau. However, council has no way of doing anything about it. Councillor Wilkins, you wish to second the motion?
No.
Well, I need a seconder.
With respect, I have a conflict.
Councillor Pickett, you seconding the motion? You may speak to it if you wish.
Do you have a conflict?
Councillor...
I sit on the panel. I have a conflict.
Of what?
So I'm...
Thank
conflict of interest.
Thank you,
I'm
yes.
going to sit here and not participate in the debate.
No, you may. If you're declaring conflict, you
I
may.
won't.
Okay, sorry. Does it go to the panel? It doesn't go to the panel, hasn't been to the panel.
It's all right, I just won't.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any further debate? Then I put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Councillor Monceau, the issue of the bylaw review, page 315.
Yes, I just have a question. I'll approve off on the right page. I move according to the officer's recommendation on all of these, right through from 1 to 7. But I just wondered why since the CEO has such a significant influence on these bylaws and why they are not included, or why there is no statement in this document in relation to the CEO's performance indicators. Every other document that's in here has something in relation to that, but this one doesn't. So is that
Delivery of good governance and all
mistake?
kinds of...
Because when you look at point 3, 4 and 5 and 7, there is a very strong role of the CEO to be responsible for that.
Through the Mayor, unfortunately, an old template, council report template was used. The current template has a section in there that relates to my KPIs. So an old template's been used which didn't have it, but notwithstanding that, irrespective of the fact that there is a role, the KPIs for 2018-19 haven't been set by council, so it would say the same as every other report.
I appreciate that, but I'm just concerned about
Point
the ambition
7.
because of the significant role the CEO has over these responsibility for these bylaws. So I just wanted to raise that issue.
Monceau has moved the officer's recommendation. Councillor Wilkins, you wish to second it?
Oh, no.
Councillor Davies next on the list. You wish to second?
I have a question.
You're not. I need a seconder. Councillor Lemon, you're seconding it. You wish to speak to it? No. Then Councillor Davey, you may ask your question.
Thank you. There's no mention in here of enforcement of the bylaws, unless I've missed it. And I just wondered what provision we've made for budgeting and resourcing and all of those aspects of our enforcement of the bylaws.
Through the chair, the short answer to your question is the existing resources that are dedicated to enforcing the existing bylaws would just carry over and be responsible for enforcing the new ones. The report doesn't deal with the matter of resources or enforcement. It's simply about the content of the bylaws. But they will be enforced as they are now by our current Ranger Services team.
Through the chair, if I could just add to that, Council Administration is currently working on a report that will hopefully be presented to the next council meeting, which does address the issues of the ongoing resource requirements for the staff working in these areas, as long as, in addition to addressing the new requirements that we've picked up under the local nuisance, the Litter and Nuisance Act.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Any further debate? Then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. So we now start picking through the agenda because we have some issues here where there are conflicts. It is 8:45. What I suggest we now do is deal with 14.1, amendments to the Burnside War Memorial Hospital Constitution, which I believe two sitting people here will declare a conflict. Having dealt with that, I intend to take a 10-minute break. So, page 69, Councillor Cornish, and I presume the declarations of interest are from Councillor Davey and Councillor Osterstock, am I right?
Yes, and it's pursuant to section 73 that I declare a material conflict of interest. The fact being that I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Burnside War Memorial Hospital, and I'll be vacating the chamber.
I too, under section 63, declare a material conflict of interest as I'm a member of the board of Burnside Hospital, and I'll be vacating the chamber.
Councillor Cornish, you have pulled this for debate. Page 69.
I have, thank you, Mayor Parkin. There's just one tiny little amendment to the officer's recommendation that I'm intending on making. So it's just at the end of 2, I'm writing in with the following amendment, and then 2.1, I'm making the following amendment, being that...
You're not making amendments, you're changing your motion.
Changing the motion, sorry, I'm making an amendment to the Constitution, or proposing one, that 7.2C of the Constitution be removed entirely, and that 7.2A remove its reference to 7.2C. So I'll let you guys catch up a little bit. So 7.2 is on page 86 of the agenda, and it's the requirement that council may appoint 2 members of council as board members. So I'm removing that requirement completely from the Constitution. We've had this debate in this chamber many times. I remember in 2011 the hospital constitution was up for review, and the hospital was certainly not seeking for any elected members to be members of the council. At that time, we did throw it back and we kept the 3 members of the board. However, new conflict of interest provisions have now been introduced into the Local Government Act, which effectively mean that every time the hospital is discussed, at the moment there's 3 people that leave the room and can't discuss it. We get no feedback at all from those elected members on the hospital, because it's a conflict of interest as well for them to talk about the hospital. So I actually think that this chamber should be impartial in its decision making against any of these entities, and to do so we need to start removing some of the elected members from these boards, and this is my proposed change to this motion. I hope someone seconds it and supports it.
Thank you, Councillor Cornish. I seek a seconder. Councillor Monso.
Yeah, I will second it for the sake of discussion.
Councillor.
Thank you. I won't be I actually do support this, and I truly support this motion, but I won't support it at this time. I don't think we should be looking at this tonight. And the reason I don't believe we should be looking at this tonight is that over the last couple of days I've had some serious issues with the proposed change 6.14. And 6.14, and I don't know because I've been reading this online, so I can't give you...
83.
Thank you.
Page 83. Thank you very much. No, it's the table. Where's the table? There's a table here somewhere.
72.
Page 72. Yes. Page 72. So, oh gosh, I have to 16.5, I think, is the, which is the one? Oh, 6.15. 6.15, and I still can't find it. And I'm sorry, I remember it well enough. I have some real issues with that because it talks about changing the constitution and removing the council's oversight of any partnerships, joint ventures, and if only I could find it, I could actually read it out properly. Yes, it is in here.
Page 75.
Item 24. Yes.
Yes.
Amalgamate, enter into a partnership or into any arrangement for the sharing of surpluses, union of interest, cooperation, joint venture, management, reciprocal concession or otherwise. Now, I actually read this and read 6.15, and as a result of that, sent a number of inquiries to administration about what this means. And what I was looking for was some sort of example of what that might mean. What does it mean? What does a joint venture mean? What does a partnership mean? And my thoughts are, does this mean that Burnside Hospital could go into a joint venture with the makers of knee replacements, some medical instrumentation place, and then they will actually have exclusivity to replace the knees of their patients with that particular... I don't know this. I don't know what any of this means. And what I'd really like is a workshop, because I've struggled with what this means in terms... I think it's quite momentous in terms of what they're proposing. I think, pardon me, always a constitutional change is very momentous, and I feel like I'm being rushed, and I am of the understanding from administration that there's no rush for this. We can actually do this between now and Christmas time, and I feel to give it due consideration and to have a discussion in a workshop type scenario so all of us are very clear about what these constitutional matters will actually mean and what sort of issues are at play here, I would feel a lot more comfortable about making decisions with a well-informed council as opposed to how I feel right now in terms of 6.14 and 6.15. It looks okay, but I'm not really sure.
However, Councillor Lemon did take some comfort by the fact that both 4 and 14 and 15, nothing can happen without council approval.
I don't take that much comfort with it because I don't know what we're signing off.
Well,
I might take comfort from that if I knew what we were actually giving up, but I don't.
Okay.
So I'm not going to vote for this at all. What I will do is say that the report gets received, and at some stage in the future we'll have a workshop, and we'll actually also talk about councillor representation, I would imagine, at that workshop. So I would urge you not to support this at all, and I will have an alternative motion.
If there's an alternative motion, that's fine. We must deal with it. Just to reject it without an option would be unreasonable. Councillor Piggott.
Yeah, look, I feel Councillor Lemon's approach is the right way to go as well, for the same reason and then also a number of other reasons. I too am uncomfortable with 6.15 particularly going away, less so 6.14. Sorry, 6.14 going away, less so 6.15. And because I don't fully understand it, I understand it enough to know that's quite a biggie. And I have asked questions of administration, and I have had, as Councillor Lemon has, a response back, but only at about 6 o'clock this evening, and it doesn't really flesh it out for me that it's absolutely rock solid not to take this, that taking this out of a constitution. We have to realise what we're doing here. The constitution are the rules of the game. The only checks and balances on the hospital, and I certainly don't have any cross to bear in regard to that it's mismanaged or whatever, but ongoing, the only checks and balance on this organisation is the member, or normally members is what happens, shareholders, members of associations, members of not-for-profits. The only one of that is us. It's actually us. So we do need to make sure that we protect that going forward for future generations. I don't see it's a particular issue right this minute. I think the changing constitution is an updating of an old constitution that really does bring it up to modern standards, and I think that's to be congratulated. I certainly don't have an issue with that. But I do worry about taking those two lines out carte blanche. It's interesting, I didn't see that coming from Councillor Cornish, but I think it's a valid point to raise. Again, I think it's probably best to thrash that out a bit in a workshop so we can sort of see what issues that does bring before we necessarily go back with that way. I think it'd be a good thing perhaps to ask the hospital what impact that would do. They were looking at having 9 members, 2 of them potentially council. Perhaps that's not a problem to them. And there's a number of other areas that I would probably amend if it was up to me, and so they are items I think that are probably not fair to bounce people with tonight. A more appropriate way would be to put it through a workshop, raise those things, have them discussed, have some legal assistance here, because what we're doing here is very significant. We shouldn't underrate it. We do hold a very important position in regard to what is a multi-million-dollar business, and so we need to make sure we get that right going forward. So there's not much in the motion I disagree with, apart from the fact that I am a little concerned that it doesn't go far enough necessarily, and I feel appropriate is to vote this down, get a workshop and bring it back after that with a more full discussion of it. So
Thank you.
Vote against it.
Councillor Monceau.
Can I move a formal motion that it lays on the table for a future meeting? I'm a little concerned about a well-informed council, because if we all out tomorrow, in a couple of months' time, they won't be a well-informed council, but they will have a fresh view on this constitution. They will have a fresh view on future directions in relation to the constitution. So if I'm allowed to do that, that's what I would like to do.
You are allowed to do that. We don't debate it. We just have a mover, seconder and debate. Just for my own clarification, if that were to happen, if we were to have a workshop and we end up in caretaker, can this be a decision taken in caretaker? No. It cannot be.
It can't.
So the reality is, unless we have a very quick workshop, we would have to debate it at the next council.
Oh, would we, if it was
because that's our last meeting, is that right, isn't it? We've one more meeting.
Yes. Then I will withdraw it. I won't leave it laying on the table, because I don't think it should be done in this term.
So the issue we are facing is that this council defers it. I think we need to have an appropriate motion so it's not dead, and I'm not sure, perhaps I can get...
Advice?
Motion was fine.
That motion was
It
okay?
just sits, but it cannot be dealt with until such time as... We can have a workshop, but no decision can be taken.
I don't think it's worthwhile for us to have a workshop. I think it should be a workshop and a decision made by the new council.
So it's just on the table.
Through the Mayor, a matter which sits on the table can only be brought back to council via a motion on notice. And as Councillor Lemon said previously, there is no urgency in having these matters dealt with today, or in fact before the election. So it's highly appropriate that if council is of the view to have this matter lie on the table, then we can deal with it on the other side of the November elections.
Now, something deep in my memory tells me that anything lying on the table lapses at the end of a council term. Is that right or not?
Through the Mayor, yes, that's correct.
So...
Through you, though, the matter will still be unresolved. There's still a desire by the hospital to have these constitutional changes made. So notwithstanding the formal motion being dismissed at the election, we will still have a requirement to bring this matter before council at some stage.
And the administration will take that initiative?
Yes, well, we have to, because it's a request of the hospital.
Okay. And you will then, of your own initiative, hold a workshop?
Yes, we will.
Okay. So we have a formal motion that lie on the table. Do I have a seconder for that formal motion? Councillor Ford. Well, I need a second for that, Brady, given the formal motion.
Lapsed.
No, so lapses. Councillor Ford, you may now speak to the motion.
Actually, I am showing...
You are showing next, you're quite right.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually don't support this motion. I think Council has a significant responsibility in this matter for this historic legacy. I agree with the new constitution that we should have, we should have appoint 2 members to the board. So that's why I don't agree with this. I think we need to have representation on the board, and I also had marked 6.15, all or any of the property of the hospital provided that at all times not-for-profit status of the hospital is maintained. Yes, I agree with that, but I wondered what sort of undertakings or partnerships did they have in mind? That's what I want to know. And for that reason, I don't support this. I'd support that the report be received, full stop, because I think we're being railroaded, quite frankly.
Councillor Ford.
That, for many of the reasons that Councillor Lemon enunciated, and I do accept the concern of Councillor Cornish and others around the matter. In the first instance, I'm somewhat hesitant to reject it without any immediate further resolution, and if that's possible, I would like to move quite a simple motion, subsequent motion without notice, following the decision about...
If this lapses, I'll give you that opportunity.
Thank you.
Did you not give it to me first?
I don't think I did.
Oh, well, I'm happy to concede...
But I'm happy to broker a compromise. I think they'll be roughly the same.
Oh, I'm happy to concede to Councillor Lemon, that's fine. But, you know, I think we do need to pay respect to the board and what's been put before us, but I agree that we do need time and further consideration. And if I recall, on a previous occasion, we did have the CEO and perhaps the chair here to work through certain matters, and I would like to see that happen again, and I think that could be done. And I think, taking up Councillor Monso's point before, about a subsequent council being less experienced in this matter, that is a possibility, and I think the matter does need to be dealt with, and I think that we would be as well equipped as anyone to do that, subject to what Councillor Lemon may move. I have one specific thing that does concern me, and that is on page 95, and that is in regard to I can't seem to find it here now, but anyway, it's on, it's in relation to the appointment of visiting medical staff. You know, that whole section has been abandoned. It's on page 17 of their document, page 95 of ours. So the whole section is removed, and I can't see any replacement. I think somewhere there's a similar removal in respect to nurses, but you know, I would like some understanding about why that should be so. I know in the preamble of the Constitution it does state that is a hospital for medical purposes, but I think to simply eradicate this whole section, you know, may have implications, and I would like to see that dealt with. So, you know, I don't support the motion as it stands.
Pickett, you have a question?
I do. Would it be feasible ahead of the September 11 council meeting to have a workshop on this matter, so that it could actually be dealt with at the September 11 council meeting ahead of caretaker period? I think the only urgency around it is that I think we're in a better position as an outgoing council to progress it. I don't think the issues are huge, but there are some issues that have been raised around that need really fleshing out, and I'd see that being a 1 hour workshop maximum. Could that be organised ahead of this 11th of September council and we debate it then with guests from the hospital, assuming they're available?
Through the Mayor, yes, we can certainly do that.
Let's do that.
Debate's over, everyone's spoken. Councillor.
I think I'm going to try and push something up a creek right now. Without a paddle, exactly. Look, I really do hope you support the motion as it stands. I think, you know, it is bringing the Constitution up to a contemporary standard. Some of the aspects raised by Councillor Ford, I think, are probably information that they put in their policy documents that actually manage the hospital, the operations, rather than the governance document at such a high level. Certainly some of the aspects that were raised with that 1614 and 1615, I really do think that that's a part of bringing it up to a contemporary standard. And there are a lot of other risk management aspects in this constitution that have been built in that actually comply with new laws and are up to date. So there are those aspects that I feel quite comfortable in supporting the motion and the constitution as it stands. In terms of the membership, Councillor Wilkins, there is no council representatives on this board. Even if you put two, they're not allowed to represent council on that board. So it's not council representation on that board. We haven't had it for the last 8 odd years since the change in the conflict of interest policy. So we need to be very clear as to whether or not we want to actually water down this chamber when it comes to issues on the council, or alternatively, burden a hospital that's trying to run a business with councillors that might not know, the number of bed sick days that are required for it to be profitable during a month, how many maternity patients are required. These are things that, a hospital needs to do and work out, let alone all the risks that go along with managing and maintaining a hospital. And I do think that there on both sides, it's very risky having elected members put on there. So I do hope that we do look at that seriously to remove them. I know I'm not going to win this. I'm really going to try hard. Please support the motion as it stands. Thanks.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? The motion is comprehensively lost. And Councillor Lemon, you have the option to run an alternative, thanks to the graciousness of Councillor Ford. My error, if I did make one.
I propose that the alternative motion is that the report be received, that council administration conduct a workshop before the next meeting of council on the 11th of September, and that this matter come back to council for consideration. This matter comes back to council for consideration at the meeting of 11th September. So I've actually incorporated, in the interests of being collegiate, I've incorporated the views that I've heard around the table, although I do not agree that the next council isn't able to do this. I actually think that's us, well, not me, but the rest of us saying we're best placed to make this decision. I actually think this decision can be made in December by whoever sits at this table. But given that that's not what anyone said, we'll make this decision on the 11th of September.
Or not.
Or not. So I hope you support this. I actually think, and the other point that I would make in this is I'm happy to have staff, the CEO and the Chief Operating Officer or whoever from the Burnside Hospital to be here to answer our questions. But I actually want an independent person to be here before that, so that we can have a very frank discussion with them about item 16.6.14.
Legal advice?
Legal advice. In terms of, because the legal advice, there's legal advice that came to me today because I was asking questions of administration prior to today's meeting that only Grant, I think, is privy to this. But the rest of you should be, because there was some stuff that came up in that about potential outlying things that might never happen, but these are things that we need to keep into account. Now, I actually think it's very important that we have that meeting with some legal advisors aside from hospital administrative staff, because there's more independence in what a legal advisor is going to tell us. So that would be what I would want for that meeting. So I hope you support that. I hope you also want that, and I hope you support this.
Thank you. As a motion, as a seconder for that event? Councillor Piggott.
Yes, I'm happy to second that. I feel the need to clarify. I've got every confidence that a new council could make this decision in regard to the Constitution. There's no question about that. However, I do think that we probably have gained from dealing with the hospital, and it obviously comes up quite a bit. So I think if we are in a position to confidently approve the changes to the Constitution before caretaker period, then we should take it. And this motion effectively gives us an opportunity to do the background ahead of actually debating it and potentially progressing it on the 11th of September. If we're unable to, that's not the end of the world, certainly, but it does give us that opportunity. So I think we should pass this motion.
Just have a question of administration. The workshop, would it be a 6 o'clock before the 7 o'clock meeting sort of style of workshop?
Through the Mayor, yes, would be.
I do wonder whether or not that would provide us enough time to get that information back from the workshop and formulate our responses, but I wonder whether or not that be reconsidered, perhaps.
Through the Mayor, I'm happy to circulate to members the information that I provided to Councillor Lemon and Councillor Piggott today. And if there are other matters, such as the matter raised by Councillor Ford, if they're provided to me, I can then have those given to our legal advisors to interrogate and hopefully have a response for you at the workshop on the 11th. It was my intention simply to represent the report that was presented tonight, but armed with that additional information from our legal advisors, in addition to anything else you want to raise between now and then, hopefully you'll have enough information at the workshop to be able to make an informed decision at the council meeting thereafter.
So please think about this early, get the request in early so that it can be dealt with expeditiously. Moved and seconded. Any further debate? May I put the motion? No. Okay, well, the debate's closed. You may sum up.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question of administration. Is there any reason why we can't meet next Tuesday night on this matter?
Through the Mayor, I believe it's DAP next Tuesday night.
Ah.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. I propose seek a recommendation. We have a 10-minute break. Move Councillor Wilkins, seconded Councillor Piggott, and that takes us till 21:24. Yeah. Yes, vote. Thank you. Carry. I know. I do. Members, please take their seats. Thank you. We got a quorum yet. 1, 2, 3, 4.
5. No quorum.
1, 2, 3, 4. Still haven't got a quorum.
I just told them in there to
Yeah. Thank you. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have a quorum. Can I have a recommendation, please? This meeting recommence at 21:25. Move Councillor Monso. I've got a quorum. I do now. Seconded Councillor Lemon. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Now, what I intend doing here, we have 14.5, 14.6, 14.7, which I will do in the order of 14.5, 14.7 and then 14.6, because I have a conflict of interest with 14.6. I will leave the chamber. You will appoint a chair, and that chair will then move you into confidence and deal with 18.1, because I have a conflict with that as well. And you can call me back at the end of that. So that's one. So start off with 14.5, and what I am seeking is items 1 to 8 of that as a motion, and that's on page...
Excuse me, Your Worship.
Just hang on, I'm just trying to work it around myself.
I've got a conflict.
Page 177. And the items we are dealing with are, where's the recommendation? We're not going into confidence. What am I doing here?
Your Worship, I have a conflict.
Hang on, not yet. We're just not the way I'm going to deal with it. I've just got to...
Okay.
That's all the recommended. All of that. It's multi.
That's right. So it goes down to... Yes, this goes down to 8. But 9 deals with the War Memorial Hospital, so we'll deal with 1 to 8 and then deal with 9 separately. That's my plan.
No,
so,
I would prefer to go out for the whole lot. I'm nervous about all of these.
If you wish to go out for the whole lot...
so I wish to declare a conflict of interest.
If you wish to declare a conflict of interest...
For having a possible material conflict.
Then you do so, and then we'll deal with the whole lot. Thank you. That's one motion. So, members, I seek a motion according to the officer's recommendation on this matter. Move Councillor Cornish. Seconded Councillor Lemon. Any debate? Yes. Okay, Councillor, it's moved and seconded. Do you move and seconded wish to speak on the matter? No, so Councillor Monso, press your button. Oh, Councillor Davies, gone.
Sorry, hold on.
Oh, sorry, somebody did.
You know.
Councillor Ford now.
Your Worship, I wish to move an amendment.
Yes.
And the amendment is that, in particular, to the section on the performance of the independent auditor on page 179, that document, which is located in another section of confidential papers, should be released.
I'm just lost with which part 8. Is there any issue of which the administration has concern on this? On that particular amendment being carried, if it were carried?
Through you, Mayor, that document contains information which, because it relates to the independent auditor, still has validity today. And our recommendation is that it be retained in confidence for a further period of for 2 years, given that the information is still has currency and could
and would be unreasonable to
and could impact on the independent auditor of the day.
So, having said that, that's the recommendation of the administration, and of course we aren't in a position to read that and to make that judgment. However, you may speak to it, Councillor Ford.
Well, in that event, would you permit me to make a slight alteration to amendment? And that would be that the administration provide a legal report in respect to the release of the document pertaining to the independent auditor. At the next meeting of council.
It must be February 2019, because it's a further 2 years, and that takes it to February 2021.
Can I just see the proposed amendment, please, on the screen? That title, legal report with respect to the release of document. I presume legal advice.
Or legal advice, yes.
Legal advice on the appropriateness of releasing. Is that really what we mean? Is that really what you want? Or the consequences, the appropriateness, or the fairness? Well, I'm not sure what you can get. The advice can be all over the place. What are you aiming for?
Well, I'm aiming for transparency and some things that I'll go into if I have the opportunity to speak on it. But I think legal advice, is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that.
You may speak to that.
Thank you. Well, this document does pertain to the independent auditor at the time, and this document was moved to confidentiality in February 2014 before the commencement of this current membership of the council, or some of the current membership, and it's about a very important topic, and it's about matters that it came at a time when we subsequently received a qualified audit from the independent auditor, and that matter took a lot of money to solve. At one point, I believe we'd spent $60,000 on independent external expertise to deal with the matters that the independent auditor had raised, and I believe that we probably spent quite a lot more than that. So it's not a good look to have this document hidden away with no right of reply provided to the person about whom it is written, or the organisation about whom it is written, and I think that it doesn't provide fairness in that respect, but it also needs to be transparent, because certain actions followed as a result of what was written in this document. And I think that this organisation is a public organisation. It's not. There are no matters in there that are of commercial interest or relevance to this council, other than providing openness and transparency. And I think that we're about to look at masses of confidential documents. I would really like to see a lot of these released. I can't see the point in keeping things confidential for 15 years or more, which is what we're doing with most of them, or with many of them. And I think, but certainly this one, I think, has very concerning elements. It relates to a very important topic about the auditing of our accounts and our processes, and I think it behoves us to release it. There may be nothing further to flow from it, but in the event that the internal auditor at the time has a comment, then they would be free to do so. Sorry, external auditor, yeah, or independent auditor.
Okay, seek a seconder for the amendment. There being none. Oh, no, thank you, Councillor Pickett. Yes. You may speak to that.
No. Oh, sorry. I had one down to speak.
Look, I will support that amendment, but for a different reason, in that I don't have the same view as Councillor Ford on this issue. I think there's quite a lot of time and effort go into as to whether these things should be kept confidential. The problem with always this, confidentiality is a very important component of what we do. We just can't have everything we talk about go out into public, but it always leaves us open to being charged with not being transparent, and it leaves us open to some of the things that Councillor Ford has sort of alluded to, but never really landed in his discussion just now. The qualified audit report was very much public knowledge. The issues around it and what needed to happen to sort it all out were very much public knowledge. That was debated quite freely, actually, when it was all happening. And so it's a bit disappointing, really, in 2018 to sort of cast aspersions on that all afresh, because we happen to be keeping a document that refers to a commercial organisation we dealt with in confidence. So I would like to have that brought back to us. It's been raised. Let's have it back to us, and let's have a look at it afresh, and let's see what legal opinion is about keeping it in confidence. Because otherwise, you argue against these things, and with no basis, you just get tarnished with the fact you're keeping something incredibly bad secret. So let's do it. I support the amendment.
Anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Then I'll put that amendment. All those in favour?
Can I just reply?
No, there's no right to apply for an amendment. All those in favour of the amendment? Those against? Well, you're all against. All in favour of the amendment. No one against. The amendment is carried. So we now have a motion which is the officer's recommendation with a amended rider associated with point 8. And the consequences of that, that's not replacing anything. How are we dealing with this? It replaces the whole of 8.
I'm assuming so.
Is that what we're doing?
No, that was an addition.
So that means that it is being made confidential for a further 2 years.
That means it stays confidential, but we get this report, which we can then subsequently, if we choose, release. Okay, right. That makes sense. You can then have a motion subsequently on the basis of the legal advice we've got to revisit that decision. Okay, we all understand that. Any further debate on?
What are we now debating?
We are now debating the full motion, which has been moved, seconded, amended for point 8 only, which it says that we'll get a report, a legal report on the consequences or implications of releasing that particular item from confidentiality, which will come back to this council, I assume in confidence, which then we can act on, and it may well be then that we choose to release that particular item. Does we all understand that? So, move seconded. Any further debate?
Yes, I've got my button.
You may speak.
pressed. I'm not going to support this motion because I don't believe that any of these should be kept confidential. I think we've got about 115 confidential items tonight. And why on earth do we have to keep something confidential that goes back to 2007 and 8 or 2003? I mean, some of these go back. My only concern is personal affairs of a resident, but doesn't say that the resident is named under Whistleblower Act. But I just think, you know, we go. Councillor Piggott said openness and transparency analysis number 13 on page 181. The City of Burnside seeks to conduct its business with openness and transparency. All we're doing is shutting it down. All we're doing is hiding more things from the general public that should be there. Most people don't care anyway. They won't even bother to read it or be interested in it. But some might, and the issue is it should be all open and transparent. So I'm not going to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Monceau. The response is that in almost every case we are protecting individuals from matters, and it's obviously we don't have to, but that's what we're adopting, and that's the process we've done to date. There's no further debate. Councillor Cornish, this is your motion. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, I will. I'm supporting the motion and the amended motion. I do agree with Councillor Piggott that we do need to actually, you know, do the task and see whether or not it can or cannot be released. So, and make that effort to be as transparent as possible. I do believe that we've been doing this systematically for quite some time, and we're very good, well, the administration's great at going through all of these registers and releasing bits, you know, redacting some names in past and releasing documents with redactions. We do try where we can to release documents, but if one appears that it's flagged as an issue with one of the elected members, I think we should seek that additional advice and see where that leads. So I'm very supportive of the motion, and I hope you vote for it.
The motion, all those in favour? Those against? Motion's carried. So I now propose we deal with 14.7 because I can deal with that, and that is an information only report. It's on page, there are no conflicts for anybody, on page 197, 193. Good. Yes, thank you. Leave the chamber and declare just the next two items and not come back? Really? Have to come back and be of interest. Okay. Yeah, I think you should do it that way. So, we are now, Councillor Davey, dealing with 14.7. We have yet to deal with 14.6. When 14 points, because there is a conflict there, for me at least. There are no conflicts associated with 14.7, which is 193, and I seek a motion on this matter, which is before you. Councillor Lemon, you appeared to move the officer's recommendation. I will. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it? No. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkins? Do you wish to speak to that? No, thank you. That's the motion. Any debate?
I wish to speak.
Excuse me, I do have, there's Burnside Hospital matters in here, so.
Yes, but then
I will declare a conflict.
I thought we were doing page 193.
we're doing 14.7, not 14.6. If you wish to declare an interest and not, then it's, we have a quorum without you. Can you, the minutes please record that that's the case. We have a mover and a seconder. Is there any debate?
Yes, I've got my button.
Thank you. You may speak.
I'm going to make the same statement that I made before, that I don't believe these should be kept confidential. I think retaining some documents again that is not I don't believe is necessary. Some of them go back to 2007. Why are we wanting to put them off another 10 years? Resignation, you know, back in 2009. I mean, for goodness sake, we've moved on from there. Foothills Water Companies, CO review, OHS matter, appointment there are so many here that to me, I cannot see the need to keep these in any form of confidential. Again, I will restate, you know, one of our significant comments in here is about being open and transparent in accordance with section 91 of the Local Government Act. I don't believe that extending these confidential issues serves any purpose whatsoever except to raise doubt in the minds of the community.
Councillor Monso, there's so many here and it's difficult to deal with them, but can I suggest that you spend some time with the administration and go through each of these so you understand at least the legal and the moral aspects that we're dealing with here. No, I don't want, you can't deal with it now, but I suggest that rather than making superficial statements, you actually you deal with it beforehand if you have these issues rather than raising them now. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I have similar concern to Councillor Monso, so my question is really, you know, what process applies to each of these items that come before us? Because for us as elected members, it's a mammoth task to go into the detail of each and every one of these. Well, I mean, we are dependent on the administration, and, you know, is there a period of time that beyond which legal repercussions no longer apply? I mean, you know, is it 7 years or whatever the period of potential litigation might be for? So how do we, you know, how current is our review of these matters?
It's a valid point, and we all feel a bit overwhelmed by the list as it accumulates. I'm assured that the administration goes through these extremely carefully, but I will ask the administration to respond to your question.
Through the Chair, this particular report and the one before it makes up the annual review of our confidential items. So each council every year has to, at least once a year, review all of the confidential items on its register. So in preparation for that, the administration goes through each of these items and makes recommendations to the CEO whether they should be continued or not. So we're not actually changing anything that's already been made confidential in this review, but we are obviously, we're taking the opportunity to review those that could be released, and we do that wherever possible. The actual remakes themselves are considered as part of the, we used to do that every month as and when those confidential orders were coming up for lapsing. And we've now, at this particular time, combined, we've done a review over the next 6 months, and in report under 14.5, that deals with those that are due to be lapsing in that period. So we're trying to make the process more efficient, but to answer your question, we go through a detailed review with each of those, and we will provide a recommendation through to the CEO based on previous decisions that have been made and the currency of the matter that's in confidentiality.
And the recommendation before us is those that should be kept confidential, but specifically, where do we see those that will be released?
The annual review shows everything that's on the confidential register, and we're not actually moving anything, it's just to receive the review in this instant, and to show that we've actually done that work. So in this particular one, we're not recommending any changes. If we were to let something lapse, or the CEO decided that it was appropriate for an item to be released, then that would just lapse. It wouldn't necessarily be brought back here.
We would not know.
No, you would not know, correct.
Councillor Monso. no further debate. Is this Councillor Lemon? Can I put the motion?
Yes.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Now, so I now go back to 14.6. On this, I have a conflict of interest. I will leave the chamber. I will ask on the way out for Councillor Davey to return, and you will need to appoint an alternative chair. I will then come back and we'll go into confidence, and I will then, on the next item, I will also have a conflict. So we'll do it all over again.
Members, we need to appoint a acting presiding member for item 14.6. Do I have any nominations?
Councillor Cornish will do it.
Councillor Cornish?
Yeah.
Are there any other nominations? If not, can I have a motion to the effect that Councillor Cornish be acting presiding member for item 14.6? Councillor Monceau moved. Councillor Davey seconded. Any debate? No, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried.
Thank you, members. We're at item 14.6 and I seek a motion on this matter. Councillor Lemon.
I move the officer's recommendation. As I move the officer's recommendation, I'd like to actually point out to you, Councillor Cornish, that you're currently acting PM, and I'd be watching my back if I were you. PM. Sorry, it's my little joke for tonight.
Yep. Sorry, it took me a while.
Yes, I move the officer's recommendation.
Excuse me, I have a possible material conflict of interest.
Then we're in court.
I'm not sure. I'm so confused by all the rules I have to read, but I can't risk. We're in court.
Can, Councillor Davey, can you highlight which potential you might have? Which item number? Yes, sorry, the administration might be able to provide you with some assistance here.
So through the acting presiding member, I can confirm that this report contains all of the orders and recommends remaking one order that relates to the various matters concerning Councillor Baxter. When these have been previously considered, it's only those individuals such as Mayor Parkin, Councillor Davis, Councillor Rossiter and Councillor Baxter that have declared an interest in these matters. So this report deals entirely with those issues.
Thank you. There's no other conflict of interest, no other codes of conduct that are being considered in this?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Do you feel comfortable to remain in the chamber? Thank you, Councillor Davey. So I have a mover, Councillor Lemon. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wilkins. Would you like to speak to the motion? Anyone else would like to? Councillor Ford?
Can I ask a question about item 67? Is it? Oh no, they're all item 67. Point 26 then refers to a motion on notice to the LGA mutual liability scheme that I think I recall. I can't understand why that should be in confidence.
Is this page 191?
Yes, it is here.
93G is the rationale. We're getting that detail for you, Councillor Ford.
Through the chair, we don't have that detail here. We would have to go into confidence to be able to discuss it in detail. All I can say is that it was remade in January 2018, so that was remade in confidence at that point, and it's due to lapse on in 2023. So again, this is just part of an annual review. We're not actually making a decision about retaining or extending that in confidence.
Does that make some sense?
Well, no, because, I mean, these are appointed, they are annual, they do require annual review.
Yes.
And, you know...
Through the chair, nothing has changed in terms of that recommendation that was made back in January. Nothing has changed about that item.
Well, it wasn't made by me. You know, well, could I have permission to speak on this?
On the motion? Or
Yes.
just obviously, if it's a matter of confidence, you know, if you be careful what you're actually talking about.
Yes, I'm extremely careful. You know,
Unless, of course, you'd like us to actually go into confidence now, so you can actually discuss this matter. That is potentially an option.
No, I don't think I'll waste the time of council, but I would like to make a point about it. And you know, I will respect the confidence that applies to it as it stands, but the point is that if that's the motion that I recall, it was a motion to seek consideration by...
Bev, you've got to be very careful about the content of the motion.
It was a motion to seek consideration about a certain matter by the mutual liability scheme, and the issue about keeping it in confidence is, you know, A, that the topic is well known to everybody, and B, there's nothing in the motion that really has any issue of confidence about it, because it doesn't specify the details, and C, the response of the mutual liability scheme is particularly what concerns me about this issue, and so all that remains in confidence, and you know, the function of the mutual liability scheme is, I think, something that needs examination, and
well,
you know, that concerns me.
I understand that. That's obviously not the topic of this.
Well,
you know.
But anyway, I'm just pointing to the reason why it concerns me that so many things are just hidden away in confidence. You know, and this is an example of one that really I don't think has had adequate consideration.
Okay, thank you. I will point out to the chamber that obviously, as Mr. Cooper just mentioned, these are a list of motions that this chamber has voted to keep in confidence for a period of time. This particular one we voted earlier this year to keep in confidence for a 5-year period, and we're keeping the motion, the minutes and the audio recording, so that might have been, you know, things that have been said that can't actually be released. So it's only the annual review that we're going through, and I would say for any elected member, if you do have a particular issue, to actually go to the administration and talk through your concerns on that particular topic, and there may be something that can be released, you know, redacted, some items redacted, and we might be able to get some partial sort of transparency on those items if so needed, but that should be something that you take up with the administration on an as-needs basis for those items. Anyone else like to talk to the motion?
Yes, me.
Councillor Monceau. Peter. Sorry, you. Thank you.
I'm just going to say the same thing, and that is that I don't believe I voted against these motions being confidential back at the beginning of the year. I still believe they shouldn't be confidential. I'm sticking to my principles on that, and therefore I will be voting against this.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? Being none, I'll go back to the mover. Would you like to sum up or just put the motion? I put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried.
Division.
A division has been called by Councillor Monceau, so those who voted for, can you please stand? So those for, Councillor Lemon, Councillor Wilkins, Councillor Piggott, Councillor Davey, Those against, Councillor Monceau and Councillor Ford. The motion is carried. And now we jump to item, what was it? We're jumping into confidence now, aren't we? Okay. We will retrieve the mayor and we'll finish off item 15.
We move on to item 15, finally on the agenda. There is, we have East Waste Management Authority special board meeting minutes. Recommendation that the minutes of that board meeting on the 17th of August be received. Can I have a recommendation to that effect? Got a mover, please. Move Councillor Pickett, seconded Councillor Cornish. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. We have no other item in 15. There's no council correspondence. Any other business? There is not, so we then move on to confidential items. And the first one is again one in which I have a conflict, so I will again vacate the chamber. And on this item, we have legal representation to assist us.
Members?
She has been waiting a while. She has, basically.
Councillor Cornish, are you prepared to be acting PM again? Or are there any other nominations?
I nominate Councillor Monceau. No. Sorry. Okay. I'll go again.
Okay, so can I have someone move that Councillor Cornish be acting presiding member for item 18.1, Councillor Davey, Councillor Lemon to second. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. I wish to also declare an interest in this particular matter and will vacate the chair.
It's the fun time when we lose all the support, but Tracy's here. Has everyone